This is also on Spotify now. Have you ever wondered what it would truly feel like to leave everything familiar behind and spend months walking toward one of the most sacred destinations in the medieval world? Tonight, you'll follow that ancient road, one peaceful step at a time. Before we begin, if you enjoy these slow journeys through history, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe. It really helps support the channel and allows me to keep creating these relaxing historical adventures. I'd also love to know where you're listening from tonight, or which historical journey you'd most like to experience someday, so feel free to share it in the comments below. Now, settle into a comfortable position. Let your shoulders relax, and if there's a bright light nearby, perhaps dim it just a little. Allow the worries of today to slowly fade into the background. There's nowhere to rush, nothing waiting to be finished. For the next little while, your only task is to walk quietly through history. The morning arrives gently beneath a pale spring sky somewhere in northern France during the 12th century. A light mist still hangs above damp fields where sheep graze quietly behind woven fences. Dew clings to every blade of grass, catching the first rays of sunlight until the entire countryside seems dusted with tiny fragments of silver. A village church bell rings once across the valley. Its sound is soft enough that it feels less like a command than a greeting to the new day. You stand outside the modest stone church where your pilgrimage has formally begun. Around you gather other travelers, each carrying little more than necessity permits. Heavy belongings have no place on a journey measured in months rather than days. A wool cloak rests across your shoulders. A broad hat promises shade when summer arrives. Your leather satchel carries bread, dried beans, a wooden bowl, a spoon carved from ash wood, and a carefully wrapped flask. At your side hangs a walking staff polished smooth from years of use by someone who walked before you. A priest offers a quiet blessing to those preparing to depart. There is no grand ceremony. Medieval life rarely slows his pace for spectacle. Farmers still lead oxen toward their fields. Bakers continue kneading dough behind warm ovens. Children chase chickens through muddy lanes with the same cheerful determination they showed yesterday. One traveler catches your attention because his preparations seem practiced rather than hurried. His name is Matthew, a cloth merchant from the city of Tours, who has completed several long pilgrimages throughout Western Europe. His beard is streaked lightly with grey, though his posture remains straight and unhurried. He smiles with the calm confidence of someone who has learned that successful journeys depend less upon strength than patience. "You need not fear the distance," he says quietly, while adjusting the leather straps around his pack. The road teaches you how to walk it. His words settle comfortably into the morning air before he begins walking at an easy pace, never rushing those who follow beside him. Soon the village disappears behind gentle hills. The narrow road winds between freshly planted fields where peasants scatter seed by hand. Wooden ploughs pulled by patient oxen carve dark lines through fertile earth. Ravens circle above, watching for worms newly exposed by turning soil. The rhythm of walking soon becomes familiar. Your footsteps settle into a comfortable pattern that requires little thought. The wooden staff taps lightly against packed earth. Birds exchange songs from hedgerows alive with spring blossoms. Occasionally a wagon passes, its wheels creaking loudly beneath barrels of ale or sacks of grain heading toward nearby markets. Matthew occasionally points toward landmarks that help travelers judge their progress. That stand of oak trees marks an old Roman road, he remarks one afternoon. Many still guide merchants, even after centuries. The remains are modest now. Grass grows between weathered stones laid generations earlier by engineers whose empire has long since faded. Yet the road still performs its quiet purpose. Like many useful creations, it survives not because people admire it, but because they continue walking upon it. As the sun climbs higher, warmth settles across the countryside. You stop beneath an elm tree beside a clear stream. Water slips over rounded stones with steady patience. Removing your boots for a few moments allows tired feet to cool in the gentle current. The relief is immediate, simple, and deeply satisfying. Lunch requires little preparation. Bread broken by hand, a wedge of hard cheese, dried apples saved through winter, and cool water gathered from the stream create a meal that asks for nothing beyond gratitude. Matthew carefully unwraps a handful of walnuts from a linen cloth. "Always keep something for tomorrow," he says with an easy smile. The road rarely warns you when the next village is farther away than expected. His advice reflects experience earned one quiet mile at a time. The afternoon carries you through stretches of woodland where towering beech trees filter sunlight into shifting patterns across the forest floor. Moss blankets fallen logs softened by years of gentle decay. Somewhere deeper among the trees, an unseen woodpecker taps steadily against old bark. Travel through forests always encourages quiet conversation. Sound carries differently beneath dense branches. Voices become softer almost without noticing. Pilgrims speak less frequently, listening instead to birds, distant streams, and wind moving through fresh leaves overhead. Near evening the woodland gradually opens once more into rolling farmland dotted with cottages built from timber frames and pale plaster walls. Thin ribbons of smoke rise peacefully from thatched roofs. Vegetable gardens stretch behind each home where onions, beans, cabbages, and herbs promise future harvests, rather than continuing after sunset. Most travelers seek shelter before darkness fully arrives. Roads become uncertain beneath moonlight, and medieval inns vary greatly in comfort. Fortunately, many monasteries welcome pilgrims whenever space allows. Tonight, your lodging lies within a Benedictine monastery standing quietly beside a small river. Thick stone walls surround gardens carefully tended by monks who understand both prayer and agriculture with equal devotion. Apple orchards fill one corner of the grounds. Bees drift lazily among flowering herbs planted for medicines and cooking alike. A lay brother greets arriving travelers with practiced kindness. No payment is demanded immediately. Hospitality remains one of the monastery's sacred duties, though donations are welcomed whenever pilgrims possess the means. Inside, simplicity governs everything. Wooden benches line a modest dining hall. Candles flicker gently along whitewashed walls. Shelves hold carefully copied manuscripts whose creation required countless patient hours. The evening meal arrives without ceremony. Barley soup seasoned with leeks fills wooden bowls. Fresh bread still carries warmth from the oven. Small portions of smoked fish provide welcome nourishment after many miles of walking. No one speaks loudly. Conversation flows quietly between bites, allowing long stretches where only spoons and crackling hearth fires accompany the meal. One elderly monk asks where each pilgrim hopes to travel. Jerusalem, Matthew answers. The monk replies quietly, thoughtfully, "Then may your feet remain healthy." They are faithful servants when treated kindly. Simple wisdom often carries farther than complicated advice. Later, after washing your bowl and helping stack wooden benches against the wall, you wander briefly through the monastery garden before sleep. Rows of medicinal plants release gentle fragrances into cooling evening air. Lavender, sage, rosemary, fennel, and mint grow in careful order. Their scents mingle softly beneath the fading light. Above, swallows perform their final graceful circles before disappearing beneath tiled roofs. The monastery bell marks the close of day. Your sleeping place is modest, a straw mattress laid upon a wooden platform beneath a wool blanket. Compared with modern expectations, it may seem remarkably plain, rather like resting in the simplest countryside hostel where comfort comes from safety rather than luxury. Yet after nearly 20 miles of walking, it feels entirely sufficient. Sleep arrives quickly. Morning returns with birdsong rather than clocks. A thin veil of mist again covers nearby fields. Dew sparkles across vegetable gardens where monks have already begun tending crops before sunrise. Bread bakes inside stone ovens while smoke curls gently into cool air. After offering quiet thanks for another day, travelers gather near the gate. Packs are adjusted. Water flasks filled, boots tightened carefully to prevent blisters that might become troublesome weeks later. Matthew kneels briefly beside his satchel. "Always inspect your straps," he says. "Leather prefers attention before it breaks." You follow his example. One buckle indeed requires tightening. Such small tasks consume only moments now, but might prevent far greater inconvenience later. Soon the monastery fades behind another bend in the road. The landscape begins changing almost imperceptibly. Broad fields gradually give way to vineyards climbing gentle slopes. Stone walls replace wooden fences in places where hills grow steeper. Farmers prune vines with practiced movements, learned across generations. A mule train appears traveling northward, carrying casks of wine toward distant towns. The animals move steadily beneath balanced loads while their driver whistles softly, never needing harsh commands. You exchange polite greetings as the caravan passes. "Safe roads," the driver calls. "And fair weather," Matthew replies. Neither man slows. Such brief exchanges are common among travelers whose paths cross only once. By midday the road reaches a lively market town surrounded by sturdy defensive walls. Gates stand open beneath the watch of local guards collecting modest tolls from merchants transporting valuable goods. Pilgrims, carrying little worth stealing through taxation, pass with only a few courteous questions. Inside the walls, everyday medieval life unfolds with gentle energy. Blacksmiths shape glowing iron into horseshoes and farming tools. Bakers display fresh loaves upon wooden shelves. Weavers hang bolts of dyed cloth whose colors brighten otherwise earthy streets. Children carry buckets from communal wells, while dogs wander patiently beneath market stalls, hoping for dropped scraps. The aromas change with every few steps. Fresh bread, wood smoke, leather beeswax candles, herbs drying beneath awnings. Even the scent of horses becomes part of the town's familiar rhythm. Matthew rests for a while beside a cooper crafting barrels. A good barrel travels farther than most people, he says thoughtfully. The cooper smiles without looking up from his work, if made properly. Together they admire neat rows of oak staves fitted so precisely that little force seems necessary to hold them together. Before leaving town, you purchase another loaf of bread and a small pouch of dried peas. Supplies remain modest because excessive weight quickly becomes an unwelcome companion. The afternoon road continues southward beneath widening skies where white clouds drift slowly above distant hills. Every mile feels less like leaving home and more like becoming part of the road itself. The familiar world has not disappeared. It has simply unfolded into something larger. As evening slowly approaches once more, the first stage of your pilgrimage settles comfortably behind you, measured not by dramatic moments but by steady footsteps, quiet conversations, shared meals, gentle hospitality, and the patient certainty that Jerusalem waits somewhere far beyond today's horizon. The journey has truly begun. The morning unfolds without haste, as though the countryside itself understands that a pilgrim's strength grows from steady rhythms rather than swift beginnings. Cool air lingers beneath the branches of chestnut trees lining the road beyond the market town. Their leaves tremble gently whenever a breeze wanders through, scattering shifting patches of sunlight across the packed earth beneath your feet. You settle into the familiar pace beside Matthew, whose walking staff finds the ground with quiet certainty, never striking harder than necessary. There is comfort in beginning another day already knowing what lies immediately ahead. You tighten the strap across your shoulder, feel the reassuring weight of your satchel, and notice how naturally each item has found its proper place. Even after only a few days, your belongings seem less like possessions and more like trusted companions, each serving a purpose without demanding attention. The road narrows as it climbs gently away from the cultivated fields. Stone cottages become farther apart, replaced by stretches of woodland where sunlight filters through young spring leaves that glow almost translucent against the bright sky. Small birds dart among the branches, pausing only long enough to fill the morning with cheerful songs before disappearing again into the green canopy. A shallow stream crosses the road over a low stone bridge built generations earlier. The water is clear enough that rounded pebbles are visible beneath its surface, while tiny fish hold themselves almost motionless against the current. Matthew waits patiently before crossing. Water deserves a moment of respect, he says quietly. He kneels to refill his flask, carefully avoiding stirring the stream. You follow his example, allowing the cool water to flow over your hands before filling your own vessel. The freshness is immediate, carrying the faint taste of limestone from the hills above. Not every traveler is fortunate enough to find clean water so easily. Along many roads, experienced pilgrims learn where springs flow throughout the year, and such places become nearly as valuable as inns. Some are marked only by memory passed from one traveler to another. Beyond the bridge, the woodland opens unexpectedly onto a broad meadow where dozens of sheep graze beneath the watchful eye of a shepherd. His long cloak moves gently in the breeze, while two attentive dogs circle the flock with practiced patience. The shepherd raises a hand in greeting. Peace on your journey. And upon your home, Matthew answers. There is no need for longer conversation. Travellers and shepherds understand each other's lives well enough without many words. Both depend upon weather, careful preparation, and the willingness to keep moving. The path continues upward through rolling hills that reveal wider views with every gradual climb. Looking back, you can still make out the distant church tower of the town you left earlier, though it now appears no taller than one finger held against the horizon. Distances during the Middle Ages are often measured less by miles than by churches, rivers, forests, or the number of nights between one place and the next. A traveller might say a village lies 2 monasteries away, or 3 days beyond a certain bridge. Such descriptions fit naturally into a world where journeys unfold at the pace of walking. As the morning advances, the road becomes busier. A family guides a wagon filled with woven baskets toward the nearest market. 2 monks from another monastery travel together while discussing passages from memory in quiet Latin. Several merchants ride sturdy horses whose saddlebags carry carefully wrapped bundles of cloth. One merchant slows beside Matthew. You still heading south? As always, the Rene crossings remain open. Good news. The conversation lasts only moments before both continue along their separate paths. Later, you ask Matthew whether he knows many travellers by name. He acknowledges the remark quietly, not always by name, more often by their roads. He gestures toward the disappearing merchant. I first met him 5 years ago near Lyon. Before that, someone else remembered him from Burgundy. Roads have long memories. The thought lingers pleasantly. Long before letters could travel quickly, roads carried reputation from village to village. Honest merchants, generous innkeepers, skilled blacksmiths, and welcoming monasteries became known through thousands of conversations shared around evening fires. By midday, clouds gather softly overhead, turning the bright blue sky into gentle shades of silver. The air cools just enough to make walking more comfortable. A light rain begins. No one rushes for shelter. Spring rain is simply another companion on the road. You pull the hood of your wool cloak forward while Matthew adjusts the waxed covering, protecting his satchel. The droplets collect upon the tightly woven fabric before sliding harmlessly away. The scent of damp earth rises almost immediately from the roadside grass, rich and fresh after several dry days. The rain remains gentle. Instead of spoiling the journey, it changes its rhythm. Birdsong grows quieter, leaves shimmer beneath countless tiny drops. The steady sound of falling water creates a peaceful backdrop that almost encourages slower breathing. The road itself darkens but remains firm beneath your boots thanks to careful maintenance by nearby communities. Medieval roads are often rough, especially during winter, yet important pilgrimage routes receive regular attention because they serve not only pilgrims, but merchants, messengers, clergy, and local farmers alike. After nearly an hour, the rain drifts eastward, leaving behind bright droplets hanging from every branch. Sunlight returns. Each spiderweb stretched between hedgerows suddenly becomes visible, sparkling as though woven from delicate threads of crystal. It always smells cleaner afterward, Matthew observes. He breathes deeply. Even old roads. The afternoon brings another gradual change. the hills become steeper, and vineyards spread across their southern slopes in neat rows, carefully following the contours of the land. Men and women work quietly among the vines, tying young shoots to wooden stakes, while children carry bundles of trimmed branches towards small carts waiting nearby. Wine has become one of the region's most valuable products. Safe drinking water cannot always be guaranteed during long journeys, and weak wine often accompanies meals throughout Europe. Vineyards, therefore, represent not only commerce, but daily necessity. One elderly vintner waves the travellers toward a shaded stone wall. "You've walked far enough for a little rest." His invitation carries the easy warmth common among farming communities accustomed to seeing pilgrims pass each season. You gratefully accept. The farmer shares coarse bread, a handful of olives preserved in salt, and a small cup of diluted wine drawn from last year's harvest. His granddaughter sits nearby, weaving fresh willow branches into baskets scarcely wider than her lap. She glances curiously toward your walking staff. "Is Jerusalem very far?" You smile gently. "So far that we have only just begun." She inclines his head slightly thoughtfully, as though trying to imagine such a distance. Her grandfather chuckles softly. To her, the next village already seems like another kingdom. Everyone smiles, and for a few peaceful moments conversation gives way to birdsong and the quiet rustle of vineyard leaves. Before departing, Matthew quietly leaves several small coins upon the stone wall. The vintner notices. You've already shared enough stories, and you've shared enough bread. Neither insists further. Hospitality often moves in quiet circles, with generosity returning naturally without careful accounting. The road continues. As afternoon slips toward evening, the landscape gradually widens once more. Hills flatten into broad valleys crossed by winding streams. Poplar trees stand in orderly lines beside narrow waterways that help irrigate nearby fields. A flock of geese crosses ahead, shepherded by two boys who whistle constantly while waving slender sticks. The birds seem entirely uninterested in haste. Their patient progress somehow feels appropriate. Walking hour after hour changes how time itself is experienced. In the modern world, long-distance travel often compresses hundreds of miles into a single afternoon aboard an aircraft or high-speed train. Here, every hill must be climbed, every bridge crossed, every village entered through its own gate. Distance becomes something your body understands rather than simply measures. That slower rhythm begins quietly reshaping your thoughts. There is less desire to hurry, less need to anticipate tomorrow. The next bend in the road becomes sufficient. Toward evening, you and the other pilgrims reach a small riverside settlement built around an old stone mill whose great wooden wheel turns steadily beneath flowing water. The sound reaches you long before the buildings appear, a slow, comforting rhythm of wood meeting water that has likely remained unchanged for generations. Freshly ground flour perfumes the air. Several villagers carry sacks toward waiting wagons, while the miller brushes pale dust from his sleeves. Tonight's lodging is simpler than the monastery. A widow named Isabel opens part of her farmhouse each pilgrimage season to travelers. Her sons now manage most of the fields, leaving her free to welcome guests whose journeys remind her of her late husband, who once completed the pilgrimage to Rome many years before. The farmhouse is sturdy, its thick stone walls keeping the interior pleasantly cool despite the afternoon warmth. A large hearth dominates the central room. Bundles of drying herbs hang from ceiling beams. Copper pots catch the fading light from the doorway. While Isabel prepares supper, everyone contributes in small ways. One traveller gathers kindling. Another draws water from the nearby well. You help peel onions beside a rough wooden table polished smooth by decades of daily use. Matthew examines everyone's boots, set them near the fire, but not too close. He gently turns one pair away from the strongest heat. Leather dislikes sudden changes. Again, it is the sort of practical wisdom acquired through years of quiet experience. The meal itself is wonderfully ordinary. A thick vegetable stew made from onions, carrots, cabbage, beans, and barley simmers slowly in the iron pot. Fresh bread accompanies every bowl, along with soft goat cheese wrapped in linen. Outside, twilight settles across the valley. Swallows skim low above the river, catching insects dancing over calm water. One by one, evening sounds replace those of the day. The mill slows. Voices fade. Dogs bark only occasionally. Somewhere beyond the fields, an owl calls from an old oak tree. After supper, Isabel brings out a small basket containing needles, waxed thread, scraps of leather, and spare buckles. Pilgrims always need repairs. Several travellers immediately begin mending torn cloaks and loose straps. You notice a small tear near the edge of your satchel where constant rubbing has worn the stitching. Mathieu sits beside you. Here he demonstrates how to reinforce the seam with short, careful stitches rather than long ones. They hold better when the road pulls against them. Working by candlelight, the repair takes only a few minutes, yet finishing it brings quiet satisfaction. There is something reassuring about maintaining the simple things upon which each day depends. Later, stepping outside before sleep, you find the sky wonderfully clear. Countless stars stretch from one horizon to the other. Without towns filled with bright lights, the heavens appear astonishingly rich, their pale glow reflected faintly upon the slow-moving river nearby. Matthew stands beside the old mill. When clouds cover the roads, he says softly, the stars remind us that every traveller follows the same sky. Neither of you speaks again for several moments. There is nothing more that needs saying. Soon the farmhouse grows still. The fire settles into glowing embers. Your repaired satchel rests beside your boots, ready for another day. Tomorrow the road will continue southward, carrying you farther from familiar places and deeper into the patient heart of medieval Europe. For now, wrapped beneath a warm wool blanket while the river turns the mill wheel through the quiet hours of night, it is enough simply to rest. Dawn arrives almost unnoticed, beginning as a pale ribbon of light beyond the eastern hills before slowly washing across the valley. The river beside Isabel's farmhouse carries the first colours of morning upon its surface, turning from grey to silver, and then to a gentle blue that mirrors the awakening sky. Mist drifts low above the water, softening every outline until trees, cottages, and distant fields appear to float quietly between earth and cloud. Inside the farmhouse, the day begins with familiar sounds rather than voices. Someone stirs the embers back into flame. A wooden bucket is lowered into the well outside. Bread left from yesterday is sliced upon the table. These ordinary tasks have greeted countless mornings across medieval Europe, repeated so often that they become almost invisible to those performing them. You rise slowly, grateful that yesterday's miles have settled comfortably into your legs rather than remaining as stiffness. Walking, like many simple skills, becomes easier through gentle repetition. Your boots, carefully dried by the hearth overnight, fit more naturally now than when the journey first began. Matthew is already awake. He sits on a low bench beside the doorway, rubbing a little tallow into the leather of his boots with a square of wool cloth. "Better to care for them before breakfast," he says without looking up. After walking, everyone is too tired. He works patiently, covering every seam where water might one day find its way inside. You follow his example with your own boots. The leather feels softer beneath your hands afterward, and somehow more dependable. Isabel serves a simple breakfast of oat porridge sweetened with a spoonful of honey from her own hives. Fresh milk, still cool from the morning milking, waits in earthenware jugs alongside coarse brown bread. The meal is quiet. No one rushes. There is no reason to. The road will still be there after breakfast. Before leaving, each traveller thanks Isabel personally. She smiles warmly, accepting every word with the calm grace of someone who has welcomed pilgrims for many seasons. "May your road stay kind, and may your harvest be plentiful," Matthew replies. The farmhouse disappears behind a bend lined with willow trees, their long branches brushing gently against the flowing river. Soon the valley broadens once again. Fields stretch across both sides of the road, divided by low stone walls and narrow irrigation channels. Farmers are already at work despite the early hour. One guides a pair of oxen pulling a heavy wooden plough, while another scatters seed with slow practiced movements that seem almost rhythmic. Children gather loose stones from newly turned soil, placing them into wicker baskets that will later help repair walls damaged during winter frost. Nothing appears hurried. Every task belongs naturally to the season. A lark rises almost straight into the sky, singing continuously until it becomes little more than a tiny shadow against the morning light. Matthew stands quietly briefly to watch it. They always seem happier the higher they climb. The bird disappears into the brightness overhead. So do pilgrims, he adds with a gentle smile. The road today follows an ancient trade route that has served travelers for centuries. Long before your own footsteps touched its surface, Roman soldiers marched here. Merchants guided wagons loaded with pottery and olive oil, and messengers carried news between distant provinces. Now the same path belongs equally to pilgrims, traders, monks, craftsmen, and shepherds. Roads have remarkable patience. They welcome every generation without remembering who came first. By mid-morning, you reach a small stone chapel standing alone beside the road beneath several enormous oak trees. Its walls are weathered. Its wooden door bears countless marks left by changing seasons. A tiny bell hangs above the entrance. Several pilgrims quietly step inside. You follow. The interior is cool and peaceful. Narrow windows admit only thin beams of sunlight that rest upon the worn stone floor. Candles flicker before a simple altar decorated with fresh wildflowers gathered from nearby meadows. No service is taking place. No priest is present. The silence itself feels like a kind of welcome. Some travellers kneel briefly. Others simply sit upon the wooden benches for a few moments before continuing. Matthew remains near the doorway. "You needn't always speak," he says softly. "Sometimes arriving is enough." Outside, a woman from a nearby cottage fills a wooden trough with fresh water for passing travellers. She considers the thought for a moment politely, as each pilgrim refills a flask. "My father built that trough," she says. "He believed no one should pass thirsty. Her family has maintained it ever since." Simple acts like these rarely appear in great chronicles of history, yet they quietly shaped the experience of thousands who travelled medieval roads. The day gradually grows warmer. Your cloak is folded neatly across your pack while the sunlight settles comfortably upon your shoulders. Butterflies drift lazily between patches of wildflowers blooming beside the roadside. The air carries the scent of time crushed beneath passing footsteps. Far ahead, the road begins climbing toward wooded hills whose darker green contrasts with the bright fields below. The ascent is gentle but steady. Walking uphill naturally slows conversation. Breathing becomes deeper. Footsteps shorten slightly. No one minds. Pilgrimage has never been a race. Halfway up the slope, you reach a broad clearing where several wagons have stopped beneath tall pine trees. Two wheelwrights kneel beside a merchant's cart whose wooden wheel has cracked along one spoke. The repair is already underway. Fresh-cut ash wood lies nearby. Iron bands warm slowly within a small charcoal fire. The smell of resin fills the clearing. Matthew watches with obvious interest. A skilled wheelwright saves journeys. One of the craftsmen looks up and smiles. A poor one ends them. Everyone laughs quietly. The wheelwright explains that the replacement spoke was shaped only yesterday after another traveller mentioned the damaged wheel farther north. He had prepared it before the wagon even arrived. Experience often begins long before the work itself. You remain only a short while before continuing. As the road enters the forest, the air cools pleasantly beneath towering pines and ancient beeches. Their trunks rise like great stone columns supporting a roof of gently moving leaves. Sunlight reaches the forest floor only in scattered patches. Ferns spread thickly beneath the trees. Moss cushions fallen branches softened by many damp seasons. The sounds here are different. The wind speaks more quietly. Birdsong echoes farther. Even footsteps become softer upon layers of old leaves. A narrow path branches away toward a spring known to frequent travellers. Matthew turns confidently. This way. The spring emerges directly from pale limestone, collecting in a shallow basin before flowing into a narrow stream. The water is remarkably cold. Several pilgrims wash their faces, others simply rest. Nearby, someone has placed a smooth wooden cup hanging from a peg driven into a tree. No one knows who first left it there, yet generations of travellers have likely used the same simple kindness. While resting, Matthew removes a folded piece of parchment from inside his satchel. It is not a map in the modern sense. Instead, it contains a carefully copied list of towns, monasteries, bridges, and major river crossings along portions of the pilgrimage route. Distances are estimated by days rather than exact measurements. He notices your curiosity. My father copied this from another pilgrim. He unfolds it carefully, and his father received it from someone else. The edges are worn from years of careful handling. Each generation has added small notes in faded ink. One bridge repaired, another ferry no longer operating, a monastery known for welcoming weary travelers. The document resembles a conversation stretching across many decades. It reminds you that no pilgrim truly walks alone. Every traveler benefits from the knowledge quietly preserved by those who came before. After leaving the spring, the forest gradually begins descending toward another broad valley. The afternoon sunlight filters through the trees in warm golden shafts. Squirrels dart across fallen logs. Somewhere nearby, a cuckoo calls steadily. The descent eventually reveals a lively riverside fair taking place beside a sturdy stone bridge. The gathering is modest compared with great city markets, yet it feels wonderfully alive. Farmers display baskets overflowing with onions, beans, apples kept through winter, and fresh greens harvested only yesterday. Potters arrange rows of glazed jugs whose deep earth colors catch the afternoon light. A cooper demonstrates the fitting of barrel hoops while curious children watch closely. Musicians sit beneath an elm tree playing quietly on a fiddle and a small pipe, their melodies blending gently with the conversations around them rather than rising above them. The fair serves more than trade. It allows scattered farming communities to exchange news, arrange marriages, hire laborers for coming harvests, and visit relatives not seen since autumn. Matthew purchases several lengths of sturdy linen cord. You never know when you'll need more rope. He hands you a small piece. Keep this. It weighs almost nothing. Yet along a long road, simple cord may repair a pack, secure a blanket, tie kindling, or fasten a cooking pot. The smallest items often prove the most useful. A baker invites passing pilgrims to sample flat loaves baked that very morning. Their crust is crisp. Their centers remain wonderfully soft. The smell alone is enough to draw a grateful smile. You buy one still warm from the oven. Breaking bread while sitting beneath the bridge becomes an unexpected afternoon meal shared with several travelers from the German lands. Their accents differ from yours, yet Latin prayers, familiar gestures, and the common purpose of pilgrimage bridge many differences. One elderly pilgrim points toward the south. Every road seems shorter when shared. No one disagrees. As the fair slowly fades behind you, evening begins stretching longer shadows across the fields. The road now follows the river itself. Its gentle current reflects the amber colors of the lowering sun. Water wheels turn steadily beside several mills. Fishermen draw in simple nets before darkness settles completely. The smell of fresh-cut hay drifts from nearby meadows where families gather the season's first grasses into neat stacks that will dry beneath the open sky. Watching them work, you notice how carefully every handful is placed. Nothing is wasted. Winter always returns eventually. Preparation during summer determines comfort months later. As dusk approaches, you and the other pilgrims reach a modest hospice maintained by an order devoted to caring for travelers. Unlike monasteries, these hospices exist specifically for those journeying far from home. The building is plain but welcoming. Long wooden tables fill the main hall. Clean straw has been spread across the sleeping room. Large cauldrons simmer over open fires. A kindly brother greets each newcomer by offering warm broth before asking any questions. "You've walked enough today." His words carry quiet certainty. "Eat first." The broth is simple: lentils, leeks, a little garlic. Fresh herbs gathered nearby. Nothing elaborate. Everything nourishing. Later, after helping stack firewood for tomorrow's cooking, you step outside once more. The river continues flowing beneath the fading light exactly as it did before your arrival, and exactly as it will after your departure. Mathieu stands nearby, watching swifts dart across the evening sky. The road teaches many things. A gentle expression crosses his face. But rivers teach patience even better. Together you watch the current slip quietly around smooth stones without hurry, without struggle, always moving forward. It feels like a fitting lesson at the close of another peaceful day on the long road toward Jerusalem. Morning enters the hospice quietly, carried by the scent of fresh bread and the faint crackling of a fire that has been awake longer than anyone else. Through the small windows, the first light settles across the wooden floor in pale golden strips, revealing traveling cloaks folded neatly beside sleeping places and walking staffs leaning patiently against the wall. One by one, pilgrims stir, stretching tired legs that already know another day's journey awaits them. Outside, the river is wrapped in a thin veil of mist. The water flows so smoothly that the reflections of alder trees along the bank remain almost undisturbed, broken only when a trout rises briefly beneath the surface before disappearing again. Somewhere upstream, a mill wheel begins turning with its familiar rhythm, announcing another ordinary day to everyone within earshot. A brother from the hospice carries a basket of warm loaves into the hall. "Take enough for the road," he says gently. Bread is lighter than regret. Several travelers smile at the familiar wisdom. Mathieu chooses a round loaf no larger than both hands together and wraps it carefully inside a linen cloth. "Never carry warm bread uncovered," he explains as you leave the hospice gates. It loses its softness too quickly. His habits seem endless, yet each one comes from countless miles already walked. The road follows the river south for much of the morning. Poplar trees stand like quiet guardians along the banks, their leaves shimmering silver whenever the breeze turns them over. Small boats drift downstream carrying sacks of grain, timber, and bundles of wool toward larger market towns. Their shallow hulls move with remarkable ease, guided more by the current than by effort. River travel has become one of the great lifelines of medieval Europe. Barges can transport heavy cargo that would require many horses on land, making rivers as important as roads for trade. Along these waterways, ideas, languages, goods, and stories travel together. Mathieu points toward one broad vessel loaded with oak barrels. Those may reach the sea before we do. You watch it glide around a bend, disappearing behind overhanging willows. It seems almost effortless. The river does much of the work. There is something calming about watching water carry burdens that would exhaust people. The path eventually leaves the riverside and begins climbing gently through orchards bursting with new life. Apple trees wear delicate blossoms of white and pale pink, while bees drift steadily from flower to flower with quiet purpose. The soft hum fills the air without ever becoming loud. Several families work among the trees, placing woven baskets beneath young saplings and trimming damaged branches left by winter storms. One elderly woman notices the pilgrims passing. You've chosen good weather. So far, Matthew answers with a smile. She laughs softly. The sky always reminds us that it chooses for us. The conversation ends there, simple and complete. As the morning advances, the road widens near a crossroads where travelers from several regions gradually merge into a single stream heading south. Some wear the broad-brimmed hats common in France. Others have cloaks fastened differently, reflecting customs from England, the German lands, or northern Italy. Their languages vary. Their destinations often do not. Jerusalem draws pilgrims from every corner of Christian Europe, each bringing familiar customs while slowly discovering those of others along the way. A young blacksmith leading his mule falls into step beside you for a while. His name is Lucas, and he is traveling only as far as Lyon, where an uncle owns a forge. "My village has 1 anvil," he says. "My uncle has 6. He shakes his head with quiet amazement. "I can hardly imagine so many." Matthew accepts the suggestion without speaking. "You'll soon imagine even more." The young man smiles, looking ahead with hopeful curiosity. Roads do not simply connect places. They expand expectations. By late morning, clouds gather again, though unlike yesterday, they are higher and thinner, drifting peacefully across the sky without threatening rain. The air remains pleasantly cool. Walking feels almost effortless. The countryside begins changing once more. Vineyards become more frequent. Stone farmhouses replace timber cottages. Terraces climb sunny hillsides where generations of careful labor have transformed steep ground into productive fields. Each terrace is supported by dry stone walls fitted together without mortar. Their builders shaped every rock by hand, allowing the walls to flex gently through changing seasons without collapsing. You pause briefly beside one particularly old wall. Tiny flowers grow between its stones. A lizard warms itself upon the sunlit surface before darting into a narrow gap. Even human craftsmanship gradually becomes part of nature. Around midday, the pilgrims stop beside a broad meadow where a clear spring emerges beneath a limestone cliff. The location has clearly welcomed travelers for centuries. Smooth stones form natural seats. Several ancient oaks provide generous shade. Someone long ago carved a shallow channel directing fresh water into a stone basin where both people and animals may drink. The spring never seems hurried. Its steady flow continues through every season. While several travelers gather water, Matthew begins preparing the midday meal. From his satchel come yesterday's bread, goat cheese, dried figs, and a handful of hazelnuts. "You'll notice," he says while dividing the food, "that simple meals taste better outdoors." He hands you half the bread. "You've earned this one." Nearby, 2 Benedictine monks quietly read from a small manuscript while eating their own meal. Their careful voices rise only slightly above the gentle sound of flowing water. A shepherd arrives with several goats. Without interrupting anyone, he guides them toward the lower basin before sitting beneath a tree to mend a leather strap. His movements are calm and practiced. Thread, needle, pull, tie. Nothing wasted, nothing hurried. Watching him, it becomes easy to understand why medieval life often rewarded patience more than speed. Many daily tasks simply cannot be rushed without making them worse. Bread rises at its own pace. Cheese matures slowly. Wood seasons over years. Fields produce according to seasons rather than wishes. Pilgrims gradually learn the same lesson. After resting for nearly an hour, everyone prepares to continue. Before leaving, Matthew carefully brushes away every crumb left upon the ground. Best not to encourage too many visitors after we're gone. A few sparrows already seem disappointed. The afternoon road enters a region of gentle limestone hills marked by countless small villages. Nearly every settlement is visible first by its church tower rising above orchards and gardens. Church bells become quiet companions. Sometimes they sound from nearby. Sometimes only faintly across distant valleys. Each carries its own rhythm, known intimately by the people living within hearing distance. One village bell rings slowly, another answers several moments later. The sounds drift across the countryside almost like a conversation. A group of children carrying baskets of herbs wave cheerfully as the pilgrims pass. One little boy studies Matthew's staff. Have you walked very far? Far enough to appreciate sitting down. The children laugh. So have we, one little girl replies proudly, though judging by their baskets they have likely walked no more than a mile. Distance always depends upon experience. The road bends around another hillside before revealing an impressive stone bridge crossing a broad river below. Its arches reflect perfectly upon the calm water beneath. Merchants, farmers, pilgrims, and mounted messengers all pass together, creating a quiet rhythm of movement that never feels crowded. At the center of the bridge stands a small chapel where travelers often pause briefly before continuing. Inside burns a single candle. Fresh flowers rest beside a carved wooden figure worn smooth by generations of respectful hands. You remain only a few peaceful moments. Outside again, Matthew leans upon the bridge's stone wall. This bridge has carried thousands. He watches the river below, yet every crossing belongs to only one day. There is something comforting about that thought. The bridge itself endures. Each traveller simply borrows it for a little while. Beyond the river lies a prosperous market town preparing for tomorrow's trading day. Even this afternoon, activity fills every street. Coopers roll finished barrels toward warehouses. Teamsters unload wool from wagons. Fishmongers pack fresh catches beneath damp cloth. The scent of baking bread mingles with leather, beeswax, herbs, smoke, and newly sawn timber. Every craft has its own corner. Every street its own familiar sounds. You and Matthew pause beside a parchment seller displaying maps, devotional texts, and carefully copied prayers. The merchant notices Matthew examining a small guide listing shrines across Europe. You've travelled before. A few roads. The bookseller offers a quiet agreement knowingly. Then you understand their value. He gently taps one of the manuscripts. These carry journeys too. Matthew purchases nothing. Instead, the two men spend several pleasant minutes discussing roads, ferries, and mountain passes farther south. Knowledge often serves travellers better than possessions. Leaving the market behind before evening crowds gather, the pilgrims continue another few miles into quieter countryside. The fields now glow beneath the warm light of the lowering sun. Golden wheat ripples gently in the breeze. Poppies brighten the edges of narrow paths with flashes of deep red. Swallows sweep low above the grain, hunting insects carried upward by the evening warmth. The road eventually reaches a small priory where pilgrims are welcome to spend the night. Unlike the larger monastery you visited earlier, this community consists of only a handful of brothers caring for surrounding farms and offering shelter whenever possible. The prior himself greets arriving travellers. His robe bears several careful patches showing years of faithful use. You are welcome. Nothing more is needed. Inside the modest kitchen, supper is already simmering. A fragrant pottage of peas, onions, barley, and herbs bubbles gently above the fire. Fresh cabbage from the priory garden has been added only moments before serving. One brother slices dark rye bread, while another carries clay pitchers of cool spring water. After the meal, everyone contributes according to ability. Some pilgrims sweep the hall, others stack firewood. You help carry water from the well until every bucket stands ready for morning. Matthew joins one of the brothers repairing a loose shutter before tomorrow's wind has the chance to damage it further. Watching them work together, it becomes difficult to tell who is host and who is guest. The distinction matters very little. As twilight deepens, the prior invites everyone into the garden. Rows of beans, onions, medicinal herbs, and fruit trees stretch quietly beneath the fading sky. The evening air carries the sweet fragrance of blooming roses climbing an old stone wall. A small fountain murmurs softly near the center of the garden. The prior smiles. Travelers often think they remember the great cities. He gently touches the leaves of a sage plant, but years later, many remember gardens like this. No one answers immediately. There is little to add. The peaceful garden speaks for itself. Later, lying beneath a warm blanket while crickets begin their steady chorus outside, you think not about the miles already walked, nor the many still ahead. Instead, your thoughts settle upon small moments. Cold spring water, fresh bread, the sound of bells drifting across distant fields, a repaired boot, a shared smile beside the road. Little by little, these ordinary moments are becoming the true shape of the pilgrimage. And somewhere far beyond tonight's quiet priory, Jerusalem waits with the same patient certainty that the morning will come. The bell of the little priory rings before the sun has climbed above the eastern hills. Its gentle notes drift through the cool morning air, not as an alarm, but as an invitation to begin another peaceful day. Dew rests upon every leaf in the garden where you stood the evening before. Tiny droplets gather along the edges of cabbage leaves, on the stems of rosemary, and upon the petals of roses that are only beginning to unfold beneath the growing light. A robin lands upon the stone rim of the fountain, dipping its beak into the water before flying toward the orchard beyond the wall. The world seems wonderfully unhurried. Even the breeze arrives slowly, carrying with it the fresh scent of damp earth and herbs warmed by the first rays of sunshine. Inside the priory, breakfast is already waiting. A wooden table holds dark rye bread, fresh butter churned only yesterday, soft goat cheese, and a pot of warm barley porridge sweetened with a little honey from nearby hives. Clay cups are filled with watered ale, a common morning drink whose mild strength makes it safer than uncertain water in places where wells are less reliable. One of the brothers slices apples that were carefully stored through the winter in a cool cellar beneath the priory. Their skins are slightly wrinkled now, but the fruit remains sweet. "Nothing should be wasted," he says as he places another bowl upon the table. The words are spoken so naturally that they sound less like instruction than simple observation. After breakfast, each pilgrim prepares quietly. Blankets are folded, belts tightened, walking staffs collected. Matthew kneels once more to inspect his satchel. A buckle has loosened overnight. He adjusts it with practiced fingers. "It is curious," he says, smiling to himself, "how leather chooses the quiet hours to remind us it is alive." He gently flexes the strap before standing. It stretches when it is damp and shrinks when it is dry. Best to keep listening to it. You find yourself checking your own straps without even thinking. Already, some of his habits have become yours. The brothers gather near the gate to wish everyone well. One offers each traveller a small cloth pouch containing dried herbs. "For sore feet," he explains, "soak them in warm water whenever you have the chance." The gift weighs almost nothing, yet it feels unexpectedly thoughtful. Simple kindness often travels farther than expensive generosity. Leaving the priory, the road curves through rolling farmland where morning mist still lingers in the lower fields. Cows graze quietly behind woven fences, while geese wander confidently along the edges of narrow ponds. Their occasional calls echo gently across the valley before fading into the open countryside. Ahead, the hills begin growing larger, not dramatically, only enough that each one slowly hides the next. The land itself seems to encourage curiosity without ever demanding it. By mid-morning, the road joins a wider highway paved in sections with worn stone laid centuries before during the Roman Empire. Grass grows between many of the blocks now, and some have shifted after generations of frost and rain, yet the craftsmanship remains unmistakable. Large flat stones keep the road firm even after bad weather. Deep drainage ditches run alongside it. Occasional stone markers still stand beside the route, though many of their inscriptions have become difficult to read. Matthew rests his hand upon one weathered marker. Empires fade. He gently brushes away a little moss, but good roads often outlive them. You continue southward upon the ancient pavement. Walking becomes slightly easier. The steady surface allows every step to settle naturally. No one speaks for a while. The rhythm of boots against stone creates its own quiet music. Around midday, the sound of hammering reaches your ears long before you see its source. A bridge spans a fast-moving stream where several masons are repairing one of its parapets after winter floods loosened part of the wall. Large blocks of limestone wait neatly stacked nearby. Wooden cranes powered by treadwheels lift heavier stones into place. The workers move with calm coordination, no shouted orders, no hurried movements. Each mason seems to know exactly when his turn arrives. You pause to watch. One older craftsman notices your interest. Stone prefers patience. He runs his hand across the freshly cut surface of a new block. If you hurry, it remembers. Matthew gives a thoughtful look with quiet respect. A lesson that applies to many things. The mason smiles, and perhaps to pilgrims as well. The bridge remains open while repairs continue. Crossing slowly, you pause near the center. Below, the stream rushes around polished rocks, its clear water sparkling beneath the bright sky. A pair of kingfishers dart downstream like flashes of blue silk before disappearing beneath overhanging branches. Once across, the countryside begins changing again. Forests become less frequent. The valleys widen. Fields of wheat stretch farther toward the horizon than before. Wind moves across them in long, graceful waves, making the grain ripple almost like the surface of a quiet sea. A farmer pauses from sharpening his scythe to watch the pilgrims pass. Harvest is still several weeks away, yet every tool must be ready beforehand. Preparation always comes before the busiest season. Nearby, his wife hangs freshly washed linen across long ropes stretched between fruit trees. The white cloth moves gently in the breeze, bright against the deep green orchard. Their youngest daughter chases butterflies among the grass, while an older boy carefully repairs a wooden rake. Every member of the household has found a task suited to the day. As afternoon warmth settles across the fields, Matthew suggests stopping beside a large walnut tree whose shade reaches well across the roadside. The grass beneath it is soft. The breeze carries enough coolness to make resting especially pleasant. Lunch today is wonderfully simple. Yesterday's rye bread, cheese, a handful of walnuts gathered from his pouch, dried pears. Fresh water drawn earlier that morning. Nothing more, nothing less. While eating, another pilgrim joins you. His name is Pietro, a wool weaver from northern Italy. Unlike Matthew, this is his first journey beyond his own region. He studies the road stretching southward. I imagined pilgrimages would feel grander. Matthew considers the thought before answering. They become grand by remaining ordinary. Pietro looks puzzled. The merchant continues. If every day were extraordinary, you would soon grow too tired to notice any of it. He breaks another piece of bread. But because each day is built from small things, your eyes stay open. The younger man smiles thoughtfully. I think I understand. The conversation fades naturally into comfortable silence. Far above, clouds drift lazily across the afternoon sky. One resembles the sail of a distant ship. Another stretches long and thin like fleece pulled across a spinning frame. Shapes appear. Change, disappear. No one feels the need to name them all. Continuing onward, the road gradually fills with more travelers than on previous days. Several merchants guide pack horses loaded with dyed cloth. A pair of students from Paris travel toward Bologna hoping to continue their studies. Their satchels contain more books than clothing. They discuss theology and philosophy quietly as they walk. Fragments of Latin drift back toward you with the breeze. Further ahead, a family drives a small herd of pigs toward the next market town. The animals seem entirely unconcerned with destinations. They stop frequently to investigate patches of grass before being gently encouraged onward. Watching them brings a peaceful smile. Even busy roads contain moments of gentle disorder. Late in the afternoon, the towers of a larger town finally appear beyond the fields. Its stone walls rise above surrounding vineyards. Several church spires catch the sunlight. Smoke curls upward from dozens of chimneys. Unlike the smaller villages you have visited, this place hums with the steady activity of regional trade. Entering through the main gate, you immediately notice wider streets lined with workshops. A bell founder shapes bronze for a new church bell. Nearby, leather workers stretch hides across wooden frames. The scent of oak bark from tanning pits mingles with fresh bread, herbs, beeswax, and wood smoke. A bookseller displays carefully copied manuscripts inside his narrow shop. Gold leaf glimmers faintly upon illuminated pages. Across the street, a woman sells ribbons dyed with madder, woad, and saffron. Their rich colours brighten the shaded market square. Matthew leads you toward the cloth market almost without thinking. His years as a merchant naturally draw him there. Rows of woven fabrics hang beneath wooden awnings. Fine linen, heavy wool, soft undyed cloth ready for local tailors. Several merchants recognize him. Back on the southern road? As always. How are the crossings this year? Better than last spring. Their conversations revolve around roads, ferries, weather, and harvests rather than prices. Trust between merchants grows slowly across many years. Business often begins with friendship. Matthew purchases nothing. Instead, he carefully examines several bolts of cloth, complementing the tight weave produced by local craftsmen. Before leaving, one elderly weaver quietly hands him a narrow strip of strong linen. For another repair. Matthew bows his head slightly. My thanks. The gift disappears into his satchel beside the spare cord and sewing kit. A traveller never carries too many useful things. As evening approaches, you leave the town through its southern gate, choosing to spend the night outside rather than within crowded inns. Only a few miles beyond the walls lies a meadow beside a gently flowing stream where travellers have camped for generations. Flat stones form old fire circles. Several sturdy trees offer shelter from wind. The grass is cropped short by sheep that graze here during daylight hours. Pietro decides to camp with you and Matthew. Together, the three of you gather fallen branches from the edge of a nearby copse. No living trees are cut. Dry wood burns more cleanly anyway. Soon, a small cooking fire flickers gently between carefully arranged stones. Above it hangs a black iron pot filled with water, lentils, onions, and a little barley contributed by several travellers. Someone adds herbs. Someone else contributes carrots. Without discussion, supper gradually becomes a shared meal. The scent rises warmly into the cooling evening air. Nearby, horses graze peacefully with their reins loosely tied to long picket ropes. A few travellers quietly brush their animals before settling down themselves. Others mend clothing or sharpen small knives upon smooth whetstones. One elderly pilgrim quietly carves another notch into his walking staff. Pietro notices, one for each day? The old man smiles. No, he runs his thumb across the worn wood, only for the days I wish never to forget. Darkness arrives slowly. One star appears, then another. The fire burns lower as conversations become softer. Across the meadow, someone hums a hymn so quietly that it blends almost completely with the sound of the stream. Matthew stirs the pot one last time before placing it safely beside the embers. He looks upward. When I first became a merchant, he says, I believed destinations mattered most. He watches the stars multiply overhead. Now I believe roads change us long before we arrive. The fire gives a quiet crack. No one speaks after that. There is no need. The gentle murmur of flowing water, the warmth of shared company, and the endless stars above become enough to carry the evening peacefully into sleep. The fire has settled into a bed of glowing embers by the time the last quiet conversations fade into silence. Above the meadow, the stars seem almost countless, stretching from one edge of the sky to the other in a pale river of light. Without the lamps and windows of large towns, the heavens appear far brighter than many people in the modern world ever experience. It is rather like standing far from every city today, in a place where darkness is allowed to remain dark, revealing a sky that has quietly been there all along. The stream continues its patient journey beside the camp, flowing over smooth stones with a gentle murmur that blends naturally with the occasional call of a night bird. Somewhere in the distance, a sheep's bell gives a soft chime as the animal shifts in its sleep. You rest deeply. There are no hurried dreams, only the steady comfort that tomorrow's road will reveal itself when the morning comes. Before dawn, a cool breeze slips across the meadow, carrying the scent of wet grass. The eastern horizon slowly changes from deep blue to soft grey. One by one, the brightest stars fade until only a few remain above the western hills. Matthew is already awake. He crouches beside the fire, carefully coaxing a few dry twigs into flame without disturbing anyone else. The tiny fire grows gradually, never rushing, until enough warmth rises to heat a small iron pot of water. Morning is kinder when it begins quietly, he says as you join him. The water soon begins to steam. Oats are stirred into the pot, followed by a little honey saved from the priory and several dried apples chopped into small pieces. Breakfast fills the air with a comforting sweetness. Nearby, Pietro folds his blanket with surprising care. My mother always said a neatly folded blanket makes the next evening feel closer. Matthew smiles. Wise advice travels well. The three of you eat together while the meadow slowly awakens around you. A pair of hares darts across the grass before disappearing into taller reeds. Swallows sweep low over the stream, catching insects rising with the warming air. Tiny beads of dew sparkle upon every blade of grass before the growing sunlight quietly drinks them away. Soon the camp begins to dissolve. Blankets disappear into packs. Cooking pots are cleaned with sand and water. The last traces of yesterday's fire are carefully covered with earth until only cool ash remains. Nothing is left behind except flattened grass that will stand upright again within a day or two. The road stretches south once more. It follows a shallow valley bordered by vineyards climbing sunny slopes. Workers have already begun their morning tasks. Some tie fresh shoots to slender wooden stakes, while others inspect each row for signs of damaged vines. The careful attention reminds you how much patience wine requires. Years may pass between planting a vineyard and tasting its finest harvest. The same road that carries pilgrims also carries barrels filled with the work of many seasons. One young vineyard worker pauses as your group approaches. Safe travels. And a good harvest, Matthew replies. The young man raises his pruning knife with a cheerful nod before returning to his work. The exchange lasts only moments, yet it feels complete. The valley gradually narrows until steep limestone cliffs rise on either side. Small caves appear in the rock face, some little more than shallow hollows, others extending farther into darkness. Pietro looks upward. Do people live there? Sometimes shepherds shelter during storms, Matthew answers. And long ago, a few hermits sought solitude in places like these. The cliffs reflect every sound. The tapping of walking staffs echoes softly. Birdsong lingers a little longer. Even quiet conversation seems to drift along the stone walls before gently fading. A cool spring emerges directly from one cliff, flowing into a carved stone basin blackened slightly by age. Several travelers stop there. A woman leading 2 donkeys fills leather water bags while her son washes dust from his face. An elderly pilgrim carefully rinses a wooden cup before hanging it back upon its hook for whoever arrives next. The spring belongs to everyone, and to no one. Matthew cups the cold water in his hands. Taste it. You do. The water is wonderfully fresh, carrying a faint mineral flavor unlike the streams farther north. Every spring has its own character, he says. You begin noticing after enough journeys. The path climbs gently out of the valley. Each step reveals a wider view behind you. The vineyards become smaller. The meadow where you camped has long disappeared beyond distant hills. Ahead, broad plains stretch toward the southern horizon. The landscape feels larger now, more open. The sky seems to occupy nearly half the world. By late morning, the road reaches a caravan of merchants resting beneath a grove of walnut trees. Several sturdy mules stand quietly while their loads are adjusted. Bundles of wool, sacks of salt, rolled cloth, small barrels carefully secured with rope. The caravan leader greets Matthew warmly. Still walking to Jerusalem? As long as my legs remain willing. The leader laughs. They've carried you farther than many horses. Introductions are exchanged. The caravan has come from the north and will soon turn west toward a prosperous trading city. Their routes overlap only for today. Even so, they choose to rest together. A shared meal soon forms almost without planning. One merchant contributes smoked fish, another offers dried cherries. Someone unwraps a round of firm sheep's cheese. Pietro produces onions from his satchel. Matthew slices yesterday's loaf. The food travels from hand to hand with quiet generosity. No one keeps careful count. One merchant tells of unusually heavy snowfall in the mountains during the previous winter. Another mentions a bridge repaired after spring floods. Travelers depend upon such conversations. Road conditions cannot be learned from signs, only from those returning the other way. After the meal, the caravan prepares to depart. Loads are checked once more. Every knot is tightened, every pack balanced carefully. Watching them work, you notice how evenly the weight is distributed across each mule. A poorly balanced load may seem acceptable for the first mile. After 20 miles, it becomes a serious problem. Matthew notices your attention. The beginning of a journey often decides its ending. He gently adjusts the position of your own satchel by only a few inches. The difference is immediate. The weight settles more comfortably against your shoulders. Such a small change would have been easy to overlook. The afternoon passes beneath a brilliant blue sky. Warm sunlight settles across the countryside, though a pleasant breeze prevents the day from becoming uncomfortable. The road now crosses open farmland where wheat, barley, and rye grow in broad fields divided by hedgerows alive with birds. Larks rise singing into the clear air. Finches gather among seed heads near the roadside. A kestrel circles patiently overhead. Every creature seems to have found its own work. Around the middle of the afternoon, distant bells begin ringing. At first they are little more than faint notes carried by the wind. Gradually they grow clearer. Soon the reason becomes visible. Ahead lies a monastery considerably larger than any you have yet visited. Its church tower rises above orchards and cultivated fields. Stone walls surround workshops, barns, gardens, vineyards, and guest buildings. From a distance it resembles a small village. Monasteries like this are far more than places of prayer. They preserve books, cultivate new crops, care for travelers, teach children, copy manuscripts, brew medicines, and provide shelter during difficult times. As you approach the great gate, several lay brothers are unloading sacks of grain from a farmer's wagon. Others tend beehives arranged neatly beside flowering herbs. The entire community moves with quiet purpose. Nothing appears hurried, nothing seems idle. A brother welcomes arriving pilgrims. You are expected. Pietro looks surprised. We sent no message. The brother smiles. The road usually does. Inside the guest house, travelers are shown a clean hall with rows of simple wooden beds. Fresh straw has recently been spread beneath linen covers. Sunlight pours through narrow windows, filling the room with a warm golden glow. Before supper, Mathieu suggests exploring the monastery grounds while there is still light. Together you wander through carefully ordered gardens. Rows of onions stand beside beans climbing woven supports. Medicinal herbs grow in separate beds marked with small wooden signs. Lavender, sage, fennel, mint, chamomile, the fragrance changes with every few steps. An elderly monk tends a patch of roses. He trims faded blossoms while humming softly. Matthew greets him. You have beautiful gardens. They belong to everyone who takes a quiet moment long enough to notice them. The monk straightens slowly. Plants teach us that steady care accomplishes more than occasional effort. He returns to his work without another word. The lesson lingers quietly. Later, inside the monastery workshop, several scribes continue copying manuscripts despite the fading daylight. Goose feather quills glide steadily across smooth parchment. Small pots of colored pigments rest upon wooden tables. One young scribe carefully paints a bright blue border around a decorated letter. Every movement is precise. One mistake could waste many hours. You watch silently. The room itself seems to encourage gentle breathing. Outside, evening settles across the cloisters. Long shadows stretch beneath graceful stone arches. The bell rings once more, echoing softly across gardens and fields before fading into the countryside beyond. Supper is served in peaceful silence. Bowls of bean pottage are followed by fresh bread, cabbage, soft cheese, and baked trout from the monastery's fish ponds. A brother walks slowly through the hall, refilling cups with watered wine. The meal is nourishing without being elaborate. When it ends, several pilgrims volunteer to help wash the wooden bowls. Others carry fresh water into the kitchen for tomorrow morning. No one asks them. The work simply appears, and willing hands quietly answer it. Afterward, you and Matthew stroll once more beneath the cloister arches. The stone beneath your feet has been worn smooth by generations of monks walking the same peaceful circuit. I wonder, Pietro says softly, how many pilgrims have passed here. Matthew rests a hand upon one of the ancient columns, enough that the stones no longer remember individual footsteps. The corners of his mouth lift slightly, but perhaps they remember the rhythm. The evening grows cooler. The scent of lavender drifts across the courtyard. Above, the first stars begin appearing between the dark outlines of tiled roofs. You return to the guest hall feeling rested before sleep has even arrived. Another day has gently unfolded behind you, carried not by great events, but by shared bread, careful craftsmanship, quiet hospitality, and the steady certainty that every peaceful mile brings Jerusalem a little closer. The monastery wakes before the horizon has fully separated itself from the night. In the stillness before sunrise, a single bell rings through the cloister, its clear tones spreading across orchards, gardens, and vineyards before dissolving into the cool morning air. It is followed not by hurried footsteps, but by a gradual stirring, as though every person within the stone walls has learned to greet the day with quiet patience. You open your eyes to the faint fragrance of beeswax candles and freshly baked bread. Pale light filters through the narrow window beside your sleeping place, revealing the grain of the wooden beams overhead. Around you, other pilgrims begin folding blankets and rolling their cloaks with practiced care. No one speaks loudly. The calm of the monastery seems to encourage gentler voices. Matthew is fastening the cord around his blanket. You slept well. I did. He answers softly. Good. Long roads are kinder to those who let each night do its work. Outside, the cloister garden glistens beneath a blanket of dew. Tiny droplets cling to rosemary and sage until the first sunlight catches them, turning every herb into a cluster of tiny lights. A pair of blackbirds hop between the flower beds, searching patiently for insects awakened by the damp morning. Several brothers are already working. One sweeps the stone walkway. Another carries 2 wooden buckets toward the well. A third opens the shutters of the scriptorium, allowing fresh air to drift among the desks where manuscripts will soon be copied again. The rhythm of the monastery begins long before breakfast. It is a rhythm measured by seasons rather than clocks. You follow Matthew toward the bakery, where warm loaves are being lifted from a great stone oven using long wooden paddles. The smell is rich and comforting, filling the courtyard with the familiar scent of grain transformed by careful hands and steady fire. The baker smiles as pilgrims gather, fresh from the oven. Steam rises from the crust as he breaks one loaf into generous portions. Breakfast is simple but satisfying. Fresh bread, soft cheese, a bowl of warm bean broth left from the previous evening, apples preserved through the winter, cool water drawn from the monastery well. A younger monk notices Pietro looking toward the bakery. We bake every day. Pietro smiles. It must become ordinary. The monk shakes his head gently. It never does. His answer is so sincere that everyone around the table smiles quietly. After the meal, pilgrims prepare to leave. The prior walks with each traveller to the main gate, offering the same blessing without haste. May your feet remain strong. When your turn comes, he places a small sprig of dried lavender into your hand. For your satchel. The gentle fragrance will help keep insects away from stored clothing during the warmer weeks ahead. A practical kindness. The monastery gate closes softly behind you. Soon only its tower remains visible above the vineyards. Then, even that disappears behind a gentle rise. The road today follows broad rolling country where vineyards gradually give way to olive groves. Their silver-green leaves shimmer beneath the morning breeze, revealing lighter undersides whenever the wind passes through. The trees stand farther apart than the orchards of the north. Their trunks are thick and twisted, shaped by generations of careful pruning. Some have likely been growing longer than anyone now alive can remember. Mathieu rests his hand upon the bark of one particularly ancient tree. This one has seen many pilgrims. The trunk is broad enough that 3 people together could barely reach around it. Nearby, farmers spread woven nets beneath the branches while discussing the coming harvest, still many months away. Every season already contains preparations for the next. As the sun climbs higher, the air becomes warmer than it has been during previous days. The road remains pleasant beneath scattered cypress trees that cast long, narrow shadows across the dusty path. A small group of donkeys approaches from the south carrying empty baskets. Their owner, a cheerful woman named Elena, explains that she has just sold vegetables in the nearest town and is returning home before midday. She walks beside the animals rather than riding them. The hills are easier on their backs this way. Mathieu, his expression, shows quiet agreement approvingly. They'll serve you many years. They already have. She gently pats the nearest donkey's neck before continuing along her own road. Watching her disappear around a bend, you notice how calmly the animals follow without ropes pulling tightly against them. Trust, like so many things on the road, grows quietly over time. By mid-morning, the landscape changes once more. The road climbs onto a broad ridge overlooking miles of countryside. Behind you, the fertile plains stretch toward distant blue hills. Ahead, the land begins descending gradually toward the Rhone Valley, one of the great routes leading south through medieval Europe. The view seems endless. Clusters of villages appear as tiny islands among fields of grain. Thin columns of smoke rise peacefully from morning hearths. Church towers catch the sunlight long before the houses surrounding them become visible. Pietro stops walking for a moment. I have never seen so far. Neither has the road ended. It simply continues until distance softens every detail. Mathieu smiles. One hill always introduces another. The descent is gentle. Wild thyme grows beside the path, releasing its fragrance whenever your boots brush the plants. Bees drift lazily between patches of purple flowers. A shepherd's flute carries faintly across the valley. The melody is simple, only a handful of notes repeated slowly, yet it seems perfectly suited to the peaceful morning. Near noon, the pilgrims reach a shaded crossroads marked by an old stone cross. Several roads meet here before separating once again toward different regions. Travelers gather naturally beneath nearby oak trees to eat before choosing their direction. Some continue west toward the Mediterranean coast. Others head east into the mountains. Your own road continues steadily south. An elderly woman has set up a small table beneath one tree. selling fresh cherries picked that very morning. Their deep red color brightens the shaded clearing. Matthew purchases a small handful. They won't keep long. Which is precisely why they taste so wonderful today. Their sweetness carries the freshness of early summer. Around the crossroads, conversations overlap gently. A mason returning home after months repairing castle walls. 2 students traveling toward a cathedral school. A widow visiting family in another town. A young cooper hoping to apprentice with relatives farther south. Each person carries a different purpose. Yet for a little while, every road has brought them together beneath the same trees. One traveller produces a small wooden flute while waiting for companions to finish their meal. The tune he plays is unhurried, rising softly above the rustle of leaves without demanding attention. Several children nearby pause to listen before returning happily to their game of tossing smooth pebbles into the grass. The music ends as naturally as it began. No applause follows, only quiet appreciation. The afternoon leads into richer farmland where irrigation channels carry water from nearby rivers into carefully tended fields. Men repair wooden gates controlling the flow of water. Women gather herbs growing along the edges of vegetable gardens. A boy carefully guides ducks toward a pond, using nothing more than a long stick and patient encouragement. The daily work of the countryside unfolds with remarkable harmony. Everyone appears to understand not only their own task, but how it connects with everyone else's. Near one field, a wheel has slipped from a farmer's cart. Rather than struggling alone, neighbors from nearby plots have gathered to help. One lifts, another steadies. A third fits the axle back into place. Within minutes, the cart is rolling again. No payment changes hands. Tomorrow the favor may quietly return in another form. Matur watches them with approval. Good neighbors shorten difficult days. As the afternoon grows warmer, the pilgrims seek shade beside a narrow stream lined with alder trees. The water moves slowly enough to reflect drifting clouds with almost perfect clarity. Several travelers remove their boots, allowing cool water to soothe tired feet. You do the same. The relief spreads upward through your legs almost immediately. Matthew laughs softly. I've yet to meet a pilgrim who regretted stopping beside clean water. Lunch requires little preparation. Bread from the monastery. Cheese, the last of the cherries. A handful of almonds traded earlier with another traveller. Nothing more is needed. Across the stream, a kingfisher waits upon a low branch. Without warning, it dives beneath the surface and emerges almost instantly with a tiny fish. Its bright feathers flash brilliantly before it disappears downstream. The moment lasts only seconds, yet everyone notices. Sometimes the smallest sights remain longest in memory. The road resumes beneath a sky now filled with slow-moving white clouds. Their shadows drift across fields of barley like gentle waves. The afternoon breeze carries the distant scent of lavender from cultivated plots farther ahead. As evening approaches, you begin seeing more travelers wearing the familiar scallop shell of pilgrims returning from the shrine of Santiago in the far west. Others carry badges from Rome. Every great pilgrimage route eventually touches another. Roads weave together much like rivers, joining and separating before meeting once again. One returning pilgrim, his cloak faded by years of travel, lingers briefly beside your group. Heading to Jerusalem? We are. He gives a small approving nod. Then keep your pace steady. He taps his walking staff against the ground. The road gives itself one day at a time. With that, he continues north. You watch him disappear slowly into the distance. His journey home is another's beginning. By sunset, the pilgrims arrive at a modest village built around a small stone church and a communal well standing at the center of a quiet square. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys. Children help gather chickens into wooden coops before darkness settles. A blacksmith finishes the last horseshoe of the day before closing his workshop. The village reeve welcomes travelers with the easy hospitality common along well-used pilgrimage routes. Space has been prepared inside a large timber barn swept clean and covered with fresh straw. It is humble lodging, yet wonderfully comfortable after another full day of walking. Several villagers bring bowls of vegetable stew thick with lentils, onions, carrots, and cabbage. Fresh bread follows. Then cool water from the village spring. After supper, everyone gathers outside for a little while beneath the fading light. The western sky glows softly with shades of amber and rose before gradually deepening into blue. Swifts make their final swift circles overhead before settling beneath the church roof. The church bell rings once. Then silence returns. Matthew sits upon the edge of the village well, looking toward the southern road that will welcome you again tomorrow. You know, he says quietly, when I first walked these roads, I counted the miles. He stops for a moment. Now I count the kindnesses. The words settle gently into the evening. Around you, the village grows still. Doors close. Lanterns are extinguished one by one. The stars begin appearing above another peaceful resting place, while somewhere beyond, countless more hills, rivers, and familiar roads. Jerusalem continues waiting with the same quiet patience as always. The barn settles into silence little by little. At first there is the quiet rustle of blankets being pulled into place, then the soft thud of walking staffs laid against the timber wall, and finally only the gentle breathing of weary travelers who have come to trust that another peaceful morning will always find them before the road asks anything more. Outside, the village sleeps beneath a clear summer sky. Moonlight spills softly across the square, touching the stone rim of the well where Matthew sat only a short while earlier. The church tower casts a long shadow across the lane, while ivy climbing its walls stirs almost imperceptibly whenever a light breeze passes through. Somewhere nearby, a horse shifts its weight within a stable. A dog gives one quiet bark before settling again. The sounds belong naturally to the night. They ask for no attention. When sleep finally comes, it arrives as gently as the evening itself. The first sign of dawn is not light, but birdsong. One blackbird begins alone. A robin answers from somewhere near the churchyard. Soon dozens of voices join together until the entire village seems to awaken through music rather than movement. The eastern horizon slowly brightens behind distant hills. The cool air drifting through the open doorway carries the scent of hay, damp earth, and bread already baking somewhere beyond the square. You rise feeling pleasantly rested. The rhythm of walking has begun reshaping both your days and your nights. Your shoulders accept the weight of the satchel more naturally now. Your hands find familiar straps without looking. Even tying your boots has become part of a quiet morning ritual performed almost without thought. Matthew smiles as he notices. The road has started teaching you. You glance toward him. I've still much to learn. We all do. He lifts his walking staff, even after many journeys. Outside, villagers are already beginning their work. A cooper rolls finished barrels into the sunlight to inspect their seams. A shepherd opens a gate, allowing sheep to flow calmly toward nearby pasture. The baker sweeps flour from the front step before arranging fresh loaves upon a wooden shelf where customers will soon gather. Near the well, two sisters fill heavy buckets while speaking quietly about the coming harvest. Nothing seems extraordinary, yet everything feels complete. Breakfast is shared beneath the shade of a large walnut tree growing beside the church. Fresh bread still carries warmth from the oven. Butter is spread generously across thick slices. A pot of warm milk rests beside bowls of oats. Several villagers add handfuls of ripe berries gathered from nearby hedgerows before sunrise. An elderly man joins the pilgrims for a few moments. He introduces himself simply as Grad. For nearly 40 years he has cared for the village mill. I've never travelled farther than 3 days from here. He says it without regret. The road found you instead. Matthew nods thoughtfully. Sometimes it does. The miller smiles. Every spring I meet people walking toward places I'll never see. He looks around the table. So I listen. His words linger pleasantly. Not every life is measured by distance. Some are measured by the stories that arrive at one's doorstep. Before leaving, the pilgrims thank the villagers for their generosity. Several children wave enthusiastically from beside the church. One little boy studies the scallop shell hanging from another pilgrim's cloak. Will you really reach Jerusalem? Matthew answers gently. One day at a time. The child nods as though this explains everything. Perhaps it does. The road leaves the village by crossing a narrow stone bridge beneath which a clear stream slips quietly between banks lined with reeds. Dragonflies hover above the water, their wings catching flashes of sunlight with every graceful turn. Beyond the bridge, the landscape gradually opens into broad meadows filled with wildflowers, blue cornflowers, white daisies, bright poppies, yellow buttercups. Their colors ripple gently whenever the wind passes across the grass. Honeybees drift steadily from blossom to blossom, completely absorbed in their work. The morning grows comfortably warm. Walking becomes almost effortless across the level ground. Ahead, several mounted messengers pass at a brisk pace, their horses moving far faster than anyone on foot. Dust rises briefly behind them before settling once more upon the roadside. Pietro watches them disappear. They must have urgent news. Perhaps Matthew adjusts his satchel. But urgency belongs to very few journeys. A faint warmth settles across his face. Pilgrimage is not one of them. The road itself seems to agree. It neither quickens nor slows. It simply continues. By mid-morning, gentle hills begin appearing once again. Their slopes are covered with groves of chestnut and oak, whose leaves cast shifting patterns across the path. The welcome shade cools the air immediately. A woodcutter pauses beside neatly stacked logs to sharpen his axe. Nearby, his daughter gathers kindling into a woven basket. She smiles shyly as the pilgrims pass. Her father raises 2 fingers in greeting. Safe roads. And steady work, Matthew replies. The exchange is brief. Like so many others along the journey, it asks for nothing beyond mutual goodwill. Not far ahead, the pilgrims encounter another group traveling in the opposite direction. Unlike merchants or farmers, these travelers carry the unmistakable appearance of having walked for many months. Their cloaks are faded, their staffs polished smooth by constant use. Dust clings to every hem despite careful brushing. One elderly woman wears a small palm woven from dried leaves, fastened carefully to her shoulder. She notices your curious glance. From Jerusalem. Her voice is soft. I received it there. Several pilgrims gather respectfully around her. She does not describe great ceremonies. Instead, she speaks of ordinary things. The cool mornings outside the city. The taste of olives shared among fellow travelers. The long climb through rocky hills before first seeing the walls. The journey prepared me. She smiles warmly, so that I could notice the little things when I finally arrived. Matthew bows his head slightly. Thank you. The meeting lasts only a few minutes before both groups continue along their separate roads. Yet it quietly changes the morning. Jerusalem suddenly feels less like a distant name. Someone has walked there. Someone has walked back. The road truly connects the two. As noon approaches, the warmth encourages another rest. Today it comes beside an old Roman milestone standing partly hidden beneath ivy. Its carved letters have softened through centuries of wind and rain. Even so, traces of careful craftsmanship remain visible. Nearby grows an enormous oak whose branches spread wide enough to shelter dozens of travelers. Several are already resting there. Some remove their boots. Others quietly mend clothing. A mother feeds her young daughter pieces of soft bread dipped in goat's milk. An elderly priest carefully copies notes into a small parchment notebook, recording villages and hospices that welcome pilgrims kindly. Matthew notices. Keeping a record? The priest nods. So others may travel more easily. Knowledge, like bread, grows more valuable when shared. Lunch today includes fresh onions purchased yesterday, bread, hard cheese, and a handful of cherries offered by another pilgrim who gathered them from a nearby orchard with the owner's permission. The fruit is cool from the shade. Its sweetness lingers pleasantly. After eating, Pietro takes out the strip of linen given to Matthew several days earlier. I've noticed your cloak has begun fraying. Before Matthew can object, Pietro carefully reinforces the worn edge with small, neat stitches. The merchant examines the finished repair. You've become quite skilled. Pietro laughs quietly. I've had a patient teacher. The compliment is accepted with a grateful nod. Soon everyone rises once more. Blankets are shaken, water flasks refilled, walking staffs lifted. The afternoon road gradually descends toward a broad river valley alive with activity. From the hillside, you can see boats moving slowly along the water, their square sails filled gently by the afternoon breeze. Fields stretch almost to the riverbanks, where willows dip graceful branches into the current. Small ferries carry wagons, livestock, and travelers between opposite shores. The closer you come, the busier everything becomes. This river serves not only nearby villages, but distant regions connected by trade. Salt travels downstream. Wine moves north. Timber floats upon great rafts assembled farther inland. Ideas travel with all of them. At the ferry landing, everyone waits patiently. No one complains. Crossing a river safely is worth the time required. The ferryman is a broad-shouldered man named Henri. His face is deeply weathered from years beneath sun and wind. He guides the flat-bottomed ferry with calm confidence. Step aboard, one at a time. The passengers spread naturally across the deck to balance its weight. Several horses remain remarkably still. A flock of geese seems less certain. The crossing begins. Water laps gently against the wooden hull. The current is stronger than it first appeared, yet Henri angles the ferry carefully, allowing the river itself to assist the crossing. Mathieu watches with quiet admiration. He knows every movement of this water. Henri overhears. It changes every season. He smiles. So I keep learning. Halfway across, you pause to look both upstream and down. The river reflects broad white clouds drifting overhead. Reeds sway along the shallows. A fisherman patiently waits beside the far bank, his line disappearing into the calm surface. The crossing takes only a short while. Even so, stepping onto the opposite shore somehow feels significant. Each river left behind marks another quiet stage of the pilgrimage. The afternoon light grows softer as the road continues south through fertile farmland where orchards alternate with fields of beans and barley. Children gather fallen branches for cooking fires. Women spread herbs upon woven mats to dry in the sun. An elderly man patiently repairs a wicker basket, replacing one broken reed at a time instead of weaving an entirely new one. The lesson is familiar now. Care often accomplishes what haste cannot. As evening approaches, the pilgrims arrive at a small hospice maintained beside an ancient bridge. Its caretaker, a cheerful widow named Angs, welcomes travellers with the same warm smile she has likely offered for many years. Come in. The soup is almost ready. Inside, the fragrance of lentils, leeks, carrots, and thyme fills the room. Wooden bowls are placed upon long tables. Fresh bread waits beneath linen cloths. A small fire glows steadily within the hearth despite the pleasant weather outside. After supper, several travellers gather near the doorway watching the last light fade from the river beyond the bridge. The current catches the colours of sunset gold, amber, and soft crimson before carrying them gently downstream. Mathieu rests both hands upon his staff. We've crossed many roads. He looks toward the flowing water. And many rivers. Then he smiles. But tomorrow we'll simply begin walking again. The thought brings quiet comfort. Because the pilgrimage has never been about reaching tomorrow before it arrives. It has always been about greeting each new day with steady footsteps, open eyes, and the quiet certainty that every peaceful mile has its own gift to offer.